Art by its very nature is transgressive. It's an expression of human creativity, and it's produced to be admired for its beauty and emotional power. All art can be transgressive in some way because transgression is a social construction, meaning that in a different time, place, art will hold a different interpretation. Everyone who may look at one piece of art comes from vastly different experiences, and these all work together to colour their interpretation of a piece, including whether they believe it to be transgressive or not. Instead of calling a piece of art transgressive, we call it controversial. However, even in terms of controversial art, there is a line that artists must not cross. Past this point, and their work is no longer deemed as art. There are many ways that art can be transgressive. For example, the subject. The Mona Lisa isn't conventionally beautiful. It's transgressive because the subject isn't what the audience expects. It breaks the idea that art can only capture the pinnacle of beauty. Another way that art can be transgressive is through the medium. His Christ by Andre Sereno is transgressive because it's a photograph of Christ on the crucifix which is plunged into Sereno's urine. As you can imagine, many Christians found this deeply offensive, which is why the photograph was attacked and damaged by a group of Christians. This shows the level of transgression that it holds for some people. Sereno said that the photograph is not what upsets the audience, but it's the crucifixion, which is now almost treated as a fashion accessory by some people. He also reflects on the fact that Christ was on the cross for 3 days, so not only did he bleed to death, but he most likely peed himself. Fountain by Michel Duchamp in 1917, the controversial artwork has made its way to become an iconic piece of modern art. The controversy of this piece lies in how it was created by Duchamp. The fact that he didn't actually make the piece but rather purchased it and then displayed it as a piece of art is why it is controversial. Duchamp was testing censorship and what people thought of as art. It goes against the traditional idea of moulding your own sculptures. He didn't think of the fountain as art, but rather wanted to test what people would think of it. The big thought behind the fountain is what is art? What do artists actually do, as Duchamp didn't even create his piece. It shows the movement in modern art away from things that are traditionally aesthetically pleasing onto more intellectual stimulation. Performance art is a genre that is presented live. The performance art of the 60s was particularly focused on the body, and it's often referred to as body art. The performance art of the 1960s was particularly focused on the body, and is often referred to as body art. This reflects the period's so-called materialization of the art object, and the fight away from traditional media. Some believe that it also reflects the political ferment of the time. The rise of feminism, which encouraged the thought about the division between personal and political and anti-war activism, which supplied models with politicised art actions. Although the concern of performance artists has changed since the 60s, the genre has remained a constant presence, and has largely been welcomed into conventional museums and galleries, from which it was once excluded. The foremost purpose of performance art has always been to challenge the conventions of traditional forms of visual art, such as painting and sculpture. This could be one of the reasons that it is seen as so controversial and transgressive in the art community. These artistic mediums no longer seem to answer the artist's needs. When they seem too conservative or too enmeshed in traditional art world or too distant from ordinary people, artists have often turned to performance in order to find new audiences and test out new ideas. In her performance of Cut Piece, Ono asks the audience to join her on the stage and begin to cut away pieces of fabric from her most expensive clothes. Ono herself has reenacted Cut Piece at least 6 times, and the piece has been recreated and performed by many others countless times. The actual performance of Cut Piece involves the performer remaining still on the stage and in the audience joining them on stage one at a time. Ono characterised Cut Piece as a test to her commitment as an artist. She also characterised her performance as a challenge to artistic ego, a gift, a spiritual act. Over time, the meaning and interpretation has changed, even for the artist herself. Even the interpretations that critics have had have changed over time, as the piece has been interpreted differently. Originally, critics received it as a striptease. This is transgressive because it's usually something that's viewed by the private eye. It was also interpreted as a protest against violence and against war, most importantly the war in Vietnam. And then most recently, and probably most frequently, it has been interpreted as a piece of feminist work. Then more recently in 2003, Oni went on to describe her work as against ageism, against racism, against sexism, and against violence. Although many people, including Ono herself, think of cut piece as a feminist work, at the time that it was created and first performed, no one framed it in this light. This goes to show how meanings and interpretations can change over time. Something that once could be seen as transgressive, in the future may not be seen as transgressive, and vice versa. Street art by its very nature is transgressive. This is because the majority of street art is illegal. There is controversy within the street art community itself. This is because different art by different artists is judged differently. For example, the majority of people see tagging as a crime, and artists may face prosecution, and the tag is always removed as quickly as possible. However, Banksy, a famous street artist, his work can make millions. It shows the differences within the street art community itself. While some art is revered and society appreciates it, other pieces of art are seen as a nuisance and just to be removed. However, even though Banksy's work is seen as more socially acceptable, he's still transgressive as often his work contains political messages. One of Banksy's most transgressive pieces was Disneyland, which he describes as an amusement park. It's an alternative to the soulless sugar-coated banality of the average family day out. A chaotic new world where you can escape from the mindless escapism. Even the name Disneyland in itself is transgressive because it breaks the idea that theme parks / days out are supposed to be an enjoyable place to be. Even the use of alienated labour, a principle directly out of Marx, is transgressive as it makes the audience feel unwelcomed. This is the opposite of what you would expect from an amusement park. The workers or actors in the park are instructed to act dismissive or be rude to customers, which isn't the customer service which you would expect. This is what makes it transgressive. This may be related to the postmodernist concept that Jamieson calls the smile of collusion. In performing their boring jobs, which they are making fun of acting bored, they are actually bored. The irony of this makes them smile. Many of the pieces displayed in Disneyland are transgressive themselves. The crash carriage of Cinderella surrounded by the press highlights the actions of the media around Princess Diana's death. There's also a boat pond containing remote-controlled migrants, with dead bodies littering the water. These tragic events aren't usually shown so bluntly, and this is part of what makes it transgressive. There's a quote that is commonly used about art. That it's not supposed to look nice, that it's supposed to make you feel something. And I think this perfectly describes that transgressive art should in fact be classed as art.